Hey, how are you doing? Let me first off start off this way. This is for information purposes only. I'm by no means a legal representative. So these are the things that you can look up for yourself, but I'm not a legal representative and I'm just putting that disclaimer out there in the beginning. Um, we're talking about a particular subject that have been affecting support groups, whether it's therapy or whether it's peer support, or even working with people in peer support, working with people in mental health. And this particular subject has been affecting people because of the stigma that comes along with it. And they're afraid to really like talk to people and these groups because of confidentiality. And that's what we're talking about today. So bear with me. I'm looking at a few things. So if you see me kind of switching um, the way I'm looking, it's not nothing to do with anything. I just have to focus on the paperwork here. Now, this particular thing I saw, it was talking about the effect that people have when they are giving out information about their life, which makes very much sense because who would want somebody to exploit them and anything they say? I don't care if it's good or bad. Support groups is supposed to be a place of safety, and it's supposed to be a place where you will feel like you're able to discuss things that you might can't discuss with anybody else, but the people that is involved with something maybe in the same nature of what you're dealing with. Um, Therapy groups is a little different than peer groups. Peer groups are more like a self-help group with no clinician involved. So that group is not pretty much strategic to particular subjects. It can change depending on the group's purpose. As the groups want to talk about, you got peer support that just talk about grief. You got peer support that talks about PTSD. You got group support that talks about animals. I mean, there's so many different group support so that you're not alone depending on the situation that you're going through. And it's a good thing because you'll be able to learn how to socialize with other people outside of yourself. Some people do it online, some people do it in person. But what sticks out in most groups is that when somebody is explaining their situation, no matter what it is, having the fear, because, at this point, you got to be very careful. They're having a fear about being open and honest because people is people. Now, I'm going to tell you the difference between a moral situation and a clinical one. A clinical one, if you break confidentiality, like in, let's say, mental health or therapeutic type groups, you can kind of get yourself in a lot of trouble where that you not only get kicked out of the group, but depending on the damage that you cause by talking about somebody's information, could end up in civil court. So you got to be careful with that. Now, self-help groups, we can morally say that we do not want people to be talking about other people's information. And if it's a small group of people that's like-minded, more than likely, it's not going to go too far to anybody. Sometimes that's difficult when you're having support groups and you may feel like you're talking about subjects that's very near and dear to you, and you bring up a particular subject, and all of a sudden you feel some type of way because now you're vulnerable and the information that you gave to someone, you have no power and control over what that information going to be like in somebody else's mind, or what they're going to do with it after it was already spoken. I always tell people that, from the years I've been doing support groups, I tell people all the time that if you are not comfortable in sharing something, or you're not in a position where you want to take a chance, even in a clinical way, If you're not in a position, if it's something that you're still dealing with and you're not come to terms with it, then that's not something that you would probably want to share in a support group, no matter what support group it is. I don't care if it's AA, I don't care if it's NA, it doesn't matter what it is. Don't matter if it's at a clinical or anything. Unless you come to terms with those particular things that you're dealing with, you are not in a position to know how it's going to be affected outside of what you just said. So if you can't come to terms to that, well, don't bring that subject up. Does that mean that you shouldn't talk about anything? No, it just means that you need to use wisdom in how much that you speak. Now, support groups, self-help support group is very good because it gives you an opportunity to really be able to be around people that's actually going through the particular thing that you're dealing with. That's why it's so much of a variety of support groups. You want to have a group, and that group might be geared towards only what you're being affected by. You might not be affected by every substance or every mental health issue. So in a support group that's self-help, there's a variety of groups that's being offered, and anybody can go to any of those support groups, depending on which one that you have a liking to do, because it's about a peer. It's about someone that can honestly say, well, I'm having this particular issue, and I see that there are like 500 people that have the same issue in this particular group. Not to say you want your group to be that long, that large, but what I'm saying is that it's easier to deal with that particular subject, no matter if it's surrounded by other subjects. But could you imagine if that you went to a PTSD, the post-traumatic situation, and now you in a group and it have nothing to do with the trauma that you experienced? This is a anger management program, and then you're not even in an anger management issue, but you're dealing with a trauma. Or what if you're in grief and you're in another group and it got something to do with making pancakes? It's not going to fit where you're trying to get your assistance of help from, or your communicable help from other people. So if you go to like treatments is based on what it says, treatment. If you're not dealing with a substance abuse issue, if you're not dealing with, maybe you're not dealing with a diagnostic or diagnosis mental health issue. So you go into a clinical type program, and you're still not going to get exactly what's going on. Now, that's totally different than when you're talking to somebody that is therapy. You got therapeutic people, that's what they do. You have psychologists, you have counselors. They're more individual support. They're the one going to talk to you individually. That's a little bit different. But in a group setting, and it's about substance abuse, and you're talking about, well, I drank a little bit, and you got people that's talking about heavy things that they did, it might feel a little uncomfortable if you don't have those particular issues, even though they might be talking about some things in trauma. But when you are dealing with trauma itself, and you have a self-help group, and it's all about other people that's having the same issue, or what people say about like-mindedness, it kind of helps you to get past certain things, because the subject that's going to come up is going to be based on people that's having trauma issues. You're not going to be talking about things that have nothing to do outside of what you guys are in comfortability or in a place of understanding of, or trying to get some type of understanding. So with confidentiality is that in the beginning of any group, some groups, they have it where that the person that's facilitating is always a facilitator. Doesn't matter if it's a treatment, or it doesn't matter. It's always a facilitator, because somebody got to keep the group in gear, because you have a certain period of time. But when you are in those settings and you got like 5 or 6 people, a person that's running a group, and these are all peers, you got to make sure that you bring up the subject, that this particular is a confidentiality, that it doesn't go anywhere. I often tell someone that you should make it legible. Like if you're going to have a support group, you need to make a legible writing and rules and really have somebody sign it if they want to be part of that group. Because, brothers and sisters, one thing you don't want somebody to go out and hurt you because they got a big mouth, because they just being nosy, because they innocently said something and not thought about it. Because that's a very common thing that happens, but it also make people not want to be a part of a group, or they feel uncomfortable because they never know if they say something, somebody's going to bring it up, and maybe with their, maybe talking to their spouse or something, and they say something, and then that spouse may be triggered, or it might be a biased feeling towards the person that said it, even if they mention no names. That's why it's probably not common to have everybody stand up and say their name. You know, if you're going to have a relationship with somebody outside of the group, then you know their name. And, you know, I always say that I don't need to say a last name. Sometimes I just say, if your first letter is E, your first letter is C, then just leave it like that. You know, because you may be coming from someplace and nobody need to know you. But you still need to get the help that's out there. So whatever group you go to, you got to remember, find out exactly what they're doing and what they're not doing. Don't be so self-expression to a group because you're comfortable talking. Observe the group. Make sure that the group is in a place of safe zone and no judgment. Make sure that, you know, if you're saying something that is not geared towards you hurting someone or you hurting yourself. Because if those are the things that you're feeling, they have numbers, and they will probably, the support group facilitator should have numbers already at the group place so that you can call if you are in an emergency situation and you need to speak to crisis, if you need to speak to somebody that can benefit you that day. But if your support group is based on these particular things, then that's something that is a long term. But if you need treatment of any kind, by all means, make sure that you get the treatment that's needed. But rely also on self. You know what I mean? Self group is very important because like mindedness is very important. Okay, until we meet again.